Hello everybody, welcome back to Student Budgets. Let's keep the intro short on this one because we have been challenged by Deirdre's budgeting journey. I will leave a little link for her channel in the comment and in the description. Please remind me if I did not. And basically she did a video in the middle of December where she did 20 questions that were set as a challenge, and I thought, and she nominated me to do it, so I thought, why not? Be quite fun to do it. Let's get started. Okay, so question number 1 is, how long have you been budgeting for? So I started budgeting, I suppose, when I first started working. So this would have been in 2023 it would have been September, but I never officially started cash stuffing until it was the 20th of December 2023. So just over a year now. And yeah, I don't really think I ever really thought about budgeting that much until I started working. I was trying to think of things to save up for. It was mainly I wanted to save up for a holiday fund, which I never actually used until very recently. Okay, so question number 2 is, do you remember seeing your parents budget their money as you grew up? And it's also linked on with the question of, do you think that the way that your parents budgeted money had any influence on how you currently handle money? I also try and write the question maybe at the bottom just so you always know what I'm on about. So for the first bit, kind of yes, my dad often was the person who would sort a lot of the finances out. And I suppose there was obviously that bit I obviously knew about budgeting. I grew up aware about it, but I never really was that involved in doing it. And I suppose it's probably been a bit of an influence. I think the way that obviously I do cash stuffing is definitely not influence because they don't do that. They use electronic pretty much only. I suppose potentially my grandparents might, because they are people who very much like cash, so potentially that might have influenced us. But I've always been someone who quite enjoyed being around money and being around cash, so it might just be sort of something like that. Okay, so question number 3 is, what made you decide to start budgeting / being more conscious about your spending habits? And I feel like for me, it was the case of wanting to just prepare myself for being here to sort of here and knowing that there's things that I'd like to do. A lot of those things actually I saved up for but never actually enacted. So a lot of it just built up, which I suppose is quite nice now looking at it. It's like, oh, well, at least I've got it. But I think obviously when I started work, I think I remember my bank account literally being at 0 for a few months, having very little. And so then when I started my first job, I was kind of like, okay, this is fun. And then I kind of splurged a lot of it for the first 2 months. And then after that, I kind of got a bit more serious about budgeting. And I'm always at the position now where, I have my budgeting book. I make, monthly budgets and things like this. And I quite enjoy it. And yeah, that's really fun for me. So just a little note for this one. This was made in 2024, so I'll just use that for what the questions were. So what were your financial goals heading into 2024? And these do actually include some personal ones as well. So I think my biggest goal wasn't actually a financial one. It was probably more to lose weight. And I did do that, weirdly enough, when I wasn't actually putting the effort in to do it. That's actually when I lost the weight, which I find really, really weird. But that was definitely, I think, my biggest personal goal. Obviously, I've already done a video on my 2025 goals. I'll leave it up here if you are wanting to have a look at it. They're just my financial ones, pretty much, bar one, which is for the YouTube channel itself. I think the financial goals were mainly to try and save up for a holiday, which obviously I'm doing this year. I didn't do last year. And I don't think I had anything else as a goal. I think I just enjoyed doing all the savings challenges. Obviously you can see my full binders plus this one here now. But yeah, I think that's I didn't actually have any specific goals, unfortunately, which I suppose is quite a boring answer. I will also answer number 5, which was, have you achieved any of your goals set? The answer is yes for both of them. So I hope that does help, I suppose, in that way. Okay, so number 6 is one of my favourite questions, and this question is, what is your favourite budgeting game / savings challenge? And I'm actually going to show you because it's easier. You can all have a guess. I'll let you have a time to guess what it's going to be, but you can probably imagine, considering which binder I've picked up, that It is Solo. Solo's just my absolute favourite. I am going to stop doing Solo for quite a bit though once it's finished because I've done it that much. However, a close second would probably have to be Scratch Offs. So, ooh, little sneak peek. I've just noticed you're getting a little sneak peek of the new challenges that we're starting shortly. But that is my absolute favourite budgeting game, probably of all time. So, question number 7 is what is one purchase you've made this year that required careful budgeting to save for? And I think for me, probably coming to uni was a massive thing. I'm going to be doing like a series, I think, over the next couple of months, which is going to be about that for people who might need it. But I definitely think coming to uni is one of those things that you have to be quite financially careful for coming into because it's so easy to get lost in it and then have very little to have at the end of it. And a lot of the time at uni, while yes, you have things to do in the future, and yes, you've got things now, you can easily spend the money now, but you need a lot of money also here. So like you've kind of got to be really careful about it. So I think starting it was definitely the thing I've probably saved most carefully for. However, if you want a more like material thing, I suppose probably the holiday that I'm going on in April is probably more that. But that was something that I saved up a lot for last year and didn't plan on doing this year. I'm doing it now. So yeah. So number 8 is what are your favourite 3 budgeting related shops this year? I would have to say probably Budget with Ira would be up there as number 1. I just have Budget with Ira stuff. I think a lot of us all agree. Obviously, all my binders are from him. Most of my challenges are from him. I probably would say Little Moon Budget. So Abby is one of my favourites as well. And I probably would have to say The Rocking Witch. She sent me obviously a lovely little message when I got something. I think it was in August. Not August, October. And that obviously it's still on my wall, and that means a lot to me. So I think that's probably my top 3 for them. And I'll also talk about number 9, which are what are your top 3 favourite budgeting channels to watch this year? I probably would say Budget with Ira, Iris Budgets, and probably, ooh, who would be my third? Well, that's a tough one. I think it probably actually might be have to be a joint third between the Rocking Witch and Little Moon Budgets. It just depends on sort of the time of year for some reason. Uh, Probably if I had to give a definite answer, probably. Oh, ever so slightly Little Moon Budgets, but please don't come for me for that. Okay, so question 10 is how do you keep yourself accountable for your budgeting and spending habits? And I think for me, obviously doing this channel is massive for me because I feel a bit more responsibility. Over the summer, when I kind of stopped doing videos, that was when a lot of my budgeting went massively off track and I kind of just for example, would still put money in the binders, but it wouldn't be as much as I would normally be doing. So I definitely think that was obviously a massive thing. I think also it's just a case of if I write it down and I can see it and I have the cash, it's like a visualization sort of thing. And like, for example, if the cash is gone, it's gone. I don't have it. I can't buy anything more sort of thing. So I think that might be something, and that's obviously a great bit of advice if anyone's kind of thinking about how to cut down on spending. If you use cash, you can't spend anything else if it's gone. Question 11 is what is your highest priority sinking fund? Which is a great question because I don't probably know. I would probably say self-care is probably I'm just looking at like my budget for January, and I'd probably say actually self-care is probably my highest priority. Mainly just because I like to try and get it at the same rough level. However, obviously out is also quite important. And that's probably a close second. So, number 12 is one of my favourite questions on the list, and this is what advice would you give to someone who was starting out learning how to budget and save money? And that's actually a great question. I think what I would do, first of all, is just writing down everything you spend. And what I mean by this is not necessarily writing everything you have spent, say, in the past 2 weeks, but actually looking at from where you're starting to like when you decide, okay, I want to start budgeting for say a week or 2 weeks, write down every little thing you spend and maybe compare that with what you thought you were spending. So, for example, write down roughly how much you think and then have a look at how much you actually are. And from that, try and figure out potentially what your needs are, what your wants are, where you can put a bit more money, where maybe you need more money than you're expecting to need it in. And is there other ways that you can cut it? And I think that's probably my biggest advice for budgeting. For saving money, I think genuinely probably the same bit of advice, but probably also I would personally suggest trying cash stuffing. Even even for example, if it was just like popping, say, £1 into one of these sort of style envelopes, a week or something, because it does build up quite nicely, and that is something that is really, really great. Question 13 is, have you made any lifestyle changes this year in order to save money? I'm going to talk about my 2024 experience because it's just started 2025. And I think the biggest one that comes to mind for me is spending money. So if I not in this one, is it? It is in our teal one. So if I think about my spending money at present, I actually only give myself £10 per week, um, which for some people might be quite a lot, and for some people that might not be enough, really. I also find it quite interesting. And I was watching, I think it was like my first or second video, and I give myself, I think it was like £30 a week. And so I definitely think spending has been the biggest lifestyle change, obviously cutting down necessarily what I spend. But the way I do it instead is, instead of, for example, giving myself £30 a week, I, for example, give myself 10, but then I might pop a fiver into clothes, and top it up. And then obviously, therefore, when I, for example, go on a day out, I've got spare money for day out, and it doesn't have to come out of spending. So it just makes my life a bit easier. I think probably the other biggest lifestyle change is obviously changing whereabouts my money goes to. For example, I used to budget a lot for clothes. I now don't bother as much and try and use what I've got and try and reduce how much I spend on clothing. But I wouldn't say that's been like a massive lifestyle change compared to spending. Question is, what is something you would like to spend less on in 2025? That is actually a great question. I'm trying to actually think about my budget itself. I suppose potentially, I think like having a buffer. So what I mean by that is, instead of, because often I'm someone who will spend money which I might not have, or I haven't budgeted for, but then I quite enjoy doing it. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it is worth it, but I think maybe like having a buffer to potentially do that might actually be worth it. I'm just having like a little look roughly of what obviously I spend. I suppose potentially cutting down on just certain little things. And one thing I am trying to consciously do is, if I'm spending on a day, I spend quite a bit. Like if I, for example, say for example, when on the day I booked my holiday, I already knew I was going to go for a haircut on that day. So I didn't mind booking the holiday, even though it says haircut there. I had it on Saturday instead, if you in case you're wondering. So I think that's something I'm probably trying to spend less on, is just having random splurges. So question 15 is, do you have an emergency fund? And I suppose the answer to that is yes, I do. I don't have anything that specifically says emergency fund on it, but I have like a pot which most of my challenges have went into. And so I do have an emergency fund if I ever need it. I am also currently in the process of saving like what is actually going to be a proper emergency fund with this challenge here. So that'll save 375, and then I'll probably pop an additional 125 and have it at 500 at least, and then work my way up from there. And yeah, I would highly encourage having one as well. Next question, number 16 is, did you have any financial challenges and setbacks in 2024, and how did you overcome them? I think the biggest one was probably the challenge or setback of uncertainty. So for example, obviously coming to uni, I didn't know exactly how much my budget was going to be. So it's a case of trying to plan a rough budget, which I did. And if I look at, I think it would have been October. That's kind of the one that you can properly sort of see the first sort of structure of it taking place. And I suppose that was probably the biggest setback. Obviously having uncertainty. I suppose with that, it was something that I couldn't necessarily help. I think the other uncertainty that I may have had is obviously having a change in my income stream. So instead of it being monthly, it now comes sort of like every 3 or 4 months, and then it's like a chunk that comes instead. So that's something different, but I suppose that's just has to be handled with being even more careful with my budget. And yeah. So number 17 is, what is your favorite part of the budgeting/payday routine? That is really, really challenging. I suppose for me, it is probably writing it down when I come to do it. Like, how much I love doing the like budget with me for January, February, whatever month it is. I love doing those videos. It's just so therapeutic. I suppose the other bit is obviously just trying to organize it. I love being organized. I'm quite an organizer at times, which is weird because I'm also one of the least organized people. But still, I love organizing when I actually have the motivation to do it. So probably it's them two things: organizing and just being able to do a video where I budget and stick stickers down and put time lapses on. That is so therapeutic for me. Next question, and the way I'm interpreting this is what would I have done differently in 2024? So it is what is something that you would do differently this year if you had the given opportunity. Now I'm going to take that as being 2024. I think with 2024, I think the thing I would probably tell myself to do differently is take your time in certain aspects. So especially for example, things like clothing, I definitely went overboard on. I think the one thing I did do differently, after a bit of time was go more weekly. I actually originally used to do monthly cash stuff, so I just do one a month, and now I try and do them weekly because I find them just more enjoyable. And I suppose it's kind of like the adrenaline, sort of whatever there's a dopamine, that's it, dopamine effect that kind of just like keeps you wanting to do it, but like in a good way. And I suppose that's something that is something I would definitely suggest doing if you are potentially thinking about going weekly instead of monthly. I would 100% suggest it. I think the other thing I'd probably tell myself to do differently is actually don't be afraid to spend at times. Because sometimes I would be like that. Like I literally, when I started off giving myself £30 a week, I genuinely would fret being like, if I got enough for the week, and I'd spend like £4 for like 3 months each week. And I was like, well, why am I giving myself that much if I'm definitely not going to use it? So that was probably something I'd tell myself differently. You know, you can cut your spending probably down to like 15, 10 even. And that's obviously what I do now. Okay, so number 19 is what is one financial goal that you are setting for yourself in 2025? I've already done a video on what my 2025 financial goals are. I'll try and remember to put them up here. But what I think one goal potentially might be is obviously with the emergency fund is also potentially having a little pot for something else. I've already talked like a sort of buffer zone pot, and potentially I might have one of them, and that might be something that I might also challenge myself to begin doing. Okay, so question 20 is what three channels would you also like to see answer these questions? And for me, I have wrote Tina's budgeting, Siri Hoard, and Little Moon Budgets. I would love to see your responses. I'd also love to see anyone else's responses who I obviously haven't mentioned but would like to potentially take part and 100% pass it on. And if they want to find out someone else, I would love to see it. But anyways, that is the end of today's video. So I hope you enjoyed it. A little bit of a different video. Let me know anything else. If you have any other questions or anything, I'd happy to answer them. And take care. Know you matter. Bye bye.